All right. In the world of international relations, every now and then you get a moment that just defies all expectations. A moment where a war that seems absolutely inevitable just stops. Today, we're diving deep into one of those moments, the Islamabad ceasefire of April 2026. This is a fascinating case study in how a 40-day conflict on the verge of becoming a global catastrophe was stopped dead in its tracks, and not by a superpower, but by some truly masterful diplomacy. To really get this, you have to put yourself there. On April 7th, the tension was unbelievable. Military forces were on the highest alert, markets were in a complete freefall, and pretty much the entire world was glued to their screens just watching the clock tick down to disaster. This quote you see here, this wasn't just tough talk. This was the final, chilling warning from the President of the United States just hours before his deadline was set to expire.
And then, silence. The storm everyone was bracing for just never came. And that incredible reversal is what we're here to figure out today. How in the world did we go from the absolute brink of Armageddon to a fragile peace in just a matter of hours? Who was pulling the levers behind the scenes? And what exactly did they do to make a ceasefire possible when all hope seemed completely lost?
So to understand the solution, you've got to understand the problem. The whole thing kicked off on February 28th. The U.S. and Israel launched major combat operations against Iran, targeting its nuclear program and military sites. Iran's response was fast and it was brutal. They shut down the Strait of Hormuz, the jugular vein of the world's oil supply, and hit back hard at U.S. allies in the Gulf. And you have to understand, this wasn't just some distant military conflict. No, this was an economic heart attack for the entire globe. The Strait of Hormuz is the single most important choke point for oil on the planet. To lose 206 million barrels of oil from there in just 1 month, it sent prices through the roof, it triggered energy emergencies in over 100 countries, and it put massive pressure on every single government to find a way out of this mess fast.
But here was the problem. Diplomacy was completely frozen. In mid-March, Iran's official position was an absolute non-starter. This quote from their foreign minister says it all. This wasn't just political posturing, it was a door slammed shut. It showed a deep, fundamental distrust. There was simply no common ground, no basis for a conversation to even begin between the two main players.
So you have this incredibly dangerous stalemate. The superpowers are locked in a standoff, and the world is desperate for someone, anyone, to break the deadlock. And that's when a regional player, Pakistan, steps onto the stage. They began this quiet, very persistent diplomatic push to try and build a bridge where, frankly, none existed.
And this wasn't some last-minute Hail Mary pass. Not at all. Look at the timeline. As early as March 3rd, Pakistan was methodically laying the groundwork. They started by getting on the same page with other key regional powers, like Saudi Arabia. And that Quad meeting on March 29th, that was huge. By getting Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt together, Pakistan built a united regional front. That created a kind of collective pressure for de-escalation that both Washington and Tehran just couldn't ignore.
So, as Pakistan successfully pries open this tiny channel for indirect talks, the real problem comes into crystal clear focus. This wasn't just a war of drones and missiles. It was a war of two completely different ideas about what peace should even look like, laid out in two competing proposals. I mean, just look at this. It shows you the massive canyon between them. The American proposal was, in essence, a demand for Iran's complete surrender. Iran's counterproposal wasn't just about stopping the fighting. It was a demand to completely rewrite the security map of the entire region. They were talking about two totally different realities. And this was the impossible diplomatic puzzle that Pakistan had to somehow solve. Which brings us right back to the cliff's edge. Those final terrifying hours of April 7th. The 8 p.m. deadline was looming, the two sides were worlds apart, and Pakistani diplomats went into overdrive, trying to prevent what really seemed like an unavoidable catastrophe. You know, the final 2 hours played out like something from a movie. At 6 p.m., total panic hits as the markets just tank. Then, around 7 p.m., a public appeal from Pakistan's Prime Minister shows up on social media, a really key piece of public diplomacy. And then, at 7:55 p.m., just 5 minutes to spare, the breakthrough comes. And it's not in some formal document, it's in a post on Truth Social. 6 minutes later, Iran confirms, and the entire planet lets out a collective sigh of relief. Now that post by Sharif, it was a masterclass in modern diplomacy. By making the request for a 2-week extension so publicly, he gave both sides a face-saving way out. It let them agree to a pause without looking like they were the ones who blinked first in this incredibly high-stakes standoff. And here you see it, the confirmation. The president's post gives explicit credit to the Pakistani Prime Minister and, this is crucial, the Army Chief, Asim Munir. This wasn't some anonymous backchannel. The mediators were named right there on the world stage, confirming that this whole deal hinged on their personal intervention.
So the big question is, how did they actually pull this off? It wasn't magic. It was a very specific and very clever strategy, something we can call diplomatic jujitsu. Basically, using the rigid positions of your opponents against them to create an opening where none seems to exist. This right here, this was the genius of it. Pakistan knew that neither Washington nor Tehran could be seen to back down, so they changed the question entirely. They didn't ask for a permanent peace deal. They just proposed a temporary, 2-week cooling mechanism. This allowed them to frame the reopening of the strait to Iran as a goodwill gesture, while at the same time framing the halt in attacks to the U.S. as a reciprocal gesture. See what they did? Both sides got to de-escalate while claiming they didn't really give up anything fundamental. Brilliant.
But why was Pakistan the only country that could have pulled this off? Well, it's because of their unique position in the world. They share deep historical ties with their neighbor, Iran. But they also have a long, even if it's sometimes complicated, strategic relationship with the United States. And that personal connection between their army chief and the U.S. president created a trusted back channel that was absolutely vital. They were really the only ones with the foot planted firmly in both worlds. So the immediate crisis was over. The world took a breath. But this was just the intermission. The main event, the direct negotiations in Islamabad, is where the real work begins. Because all the thorny issues that started the war in the first place, they're all still on the table.
And don't imagine everyone sitting around a big table at first. That's not how this is going to work. Because the US and Iran still don't have direct relations, the first phase is classic shuttle diplomacy. I mean, you can just picture it. Pakistan's prime minister literally walking from one delegation's room to the other, carrying messages back and forth. A human bridge between two sides that still refuse to sit in the same room.
And the challenge ahead is just immense. You've got real heavyweights leading these delegations. Vice President J.D. Vance for the U.S., Speaker Kalibaf for Iran. And the sticking points, well, they're the same massive issues from Iran's original proposal. A total end to sanctions, binding guarantees against future attacks, and reparations for war damages. You know, securing the ceasefire was a monumental achievement. Turning into a lasting peace, that's going to take something close to a miracle.
And that leaves us with the final, nagging question. Pakistan's diplomacy created this incredible, vital moment of relief. But is it a real path to peace? Or is it just a 14-day timeout in a devastating war that was just paused? A war that nobody was really winning anyway. The fate of the region, and maybe a lot more, is about to be decided in Islamabad.